Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to today's lecture on arterial supply of the scalp. The scalp has a rich blood supply. The blood supply to the scalp is rich enough to nourish the hair follicles, and for this reason, the smallest cut bleeds profusely. The arteries lie in the superficial fascia. Moving laterally from the midline anteriorly, the following arteries are present: the supratrochlear artery, the supraorbital arteries, the superficial temporal artery, the posterior auricular artery, and finally, the occipital artery. So let's write them down. All right, so now let's discuss these arteries one by one. First of all, we will discuss the supratrochlear and the supraorbital arteries. They are basically branches of the ophthalmic artery, and they ascend over the forehead in company with the supratrochlear and supraorbital nerves. So let's trace them. This is the supratrochlear artery. And this is the supraorbital artery. All right, so next, the third artery is the superficial temporal artery. The superficial temporal artery, the smaller terminal branch of the external carotid artery, ascends in front of the auricle in company with the auricular temporal nerve. It divides into anterior and posterior branches, which supply the skin over the frontal and temporal regions. So the two branches that the superficial temporal artery divides into are the frontal and parietal branches. Now let's trace superficial temporal artery on this diagram. This is a superficial temporal artery, and this is where it divides into two branches: the frontal branch and the parietal branch. Next, we move to the fourth artery, which is the posterior auricular artery. The posterior auricular artery it's a branch of the external carotid artery. It ascends behind the auricle to supply the scalp above and behind the auricle. So now let's trace this on this diagram. This is the posterior auricular artery, and it supplies the region of the scalp above and behind the auricle. Now, finally, let's move to the occipital artery, which is the fifth and the final branch supplying the scalp. It's a branch of the external carotid artery. It ascends from the apex of the posterior triangle in company with the greater occipital nerve. It supplies the skin over the back of the scalp and reaches as high as the vertex of the skull. Now let's trace this artery on the diagram. This is the occipital artery. All right, now this brings us to the end of this topic, the arterial supply of the scalp. We have summarized all these 5 different arteries supplying the scalp and explained their course and the area that they supply. This brings us to the end of the lecture. See you in the next lecture. Thank you.